Hello everyone, my name is Elijah, and today I'm just going to be talking about monorepos for developers. I'm going to help you understand them so that you can work with them and that you don't face any complications trying to understand what you're doing, and you can take advantage of the benefits that they offer. Well, what is a monorepo? What it is you take a couple different repositories. Say you have one app that tracks your employees, another app that tracks your machines, and puts them together into one repository so that you can clone only once. You can all collaborate on the same repository and therefore share components and resources. And then also you can, one advantage that I think they have is that you'll be able to look easily at other people's code and understand how someone else has thought through this problem and see different patterns there that you'll be able to use in your own code. Of course, the difference, as I already discussed, is instead of multiple repositories containing one for your employee tracking, one for your machine tracking, it's just going to be one repository. Not one repository per project. We're going to have one folder per project, and that's going to be inside of the folder apps. So you'll see a folder apps / and then we'll have multiple repositories in there, but in reality they're just folders. Each of those subdirectories will have its own package.json if you're using Node, and all of its own tests and everything for that repository or that microservice if you're using microservices. Each of those will contain their own setup and even their own scripts for running things. So if in one case you're running a Next.js app, in that subfolder underneath the apps directory, you'll be able to run that repository separate from everything else. But let's say in another repository you have a .NET app. You'll be able to do .NET run inside of that subfolder just as if it were its own repository. The trick is that it's all in one monolith, that's what mono stands for, repository, that holds all your code in one big ball. And why would you want to make such a convoluted app, it seems? We have one massive repository containing all of our repositories in subfolders. Isn't that just incredibly confusing? Well, here are some of the use cases and why there are benefits you can take care of. For one, it's sharing those resources. So if you're creating, say, a certain, like ShadCN is an example of this. If you have a user interface that you want to present to your users consistent across all of your different apps, across your machine tracking, across your employee tracking, you'll be able to share those components among your different apps. So when you deploy one, it's going to look similar and keep your branding as when you deploy the other one. And you only have to build each of these components once. And this will all be stored inside of the packages directory. That's going to be outside the apps, where you're going to have packages that contain, let's say, a database package, where you have your consistent database for all of your apps, and where you have a component folder where you keep all of your common components. The ease of that is that, let's say we have a similar component between a couple different apps that creates comments. We'll be able to share that across multiple, and anytime we want to make a change, it happens across all of our apps seamlessly. Of course, this is also very useful if you're using microservices or if you're doing different applications for website or mobile, but that's not really important for right now. Another thing is the code visibility. I think we should be taking advantage of this when we're using monorepos. When you're using a monorepo and you're new to the project or you're just getting started, you can look easily at the other apps and see how they're doing things. So if developers are using certain patterns for certain parts of the application and you are working on something similar, it's much easier to just move to a different folder and check out the code than it would be to request access for another repository and go look there. So a lot of this does aim towards collaboration and sharing that knowledge across the repository. Some of the challenges that we want to avoid is, of course, the coupling, and we should never be copying code, and that is solved with the monorepo by allowing us to share it among repositories, but we do want to make sure that we're not making all these different services know about each other too much. Coupling is the idea that you keep your you keep your application too tightly connected to the other one so that it can't break free and be used somewhere else. It has to know everything about the other one in order to work right. And the problem with monorepos is that if you are looking at everything else, you'll do this intuitively. You won't even think about it. So be mindful of this and don't make things coupled too tightly. Of course, on the DevOps side, there also are some challenges when you're running tests and deploying things. You have to make sure you let whatever you're using, say it's Azure, you have to let it know that, hey, I only want to run these tests when we are going to run a deployment, and you're only deploying this subfolder. You're not actually deploying the whole repository, but you are going to have to use that package here. That's a challenge that you should be aware of. Of course, the best practices when using a monorepo are keeping those shared folders in that packages folder and then creating an app subfolder inside of apps for each repository that you want to keep in the monorepo. Well, in some summary, monorepos are a collection of repositories in one repository, which allow you to share the code, collaborate more efficiently, but it does give you some problems and some headaches when you're deploying things, and you do want to be careful about coupling. However, if you take a look at other people's code and you use the packages wisely, this can be a powerful tool, and it can reduce a lot of stress and strain on trying to keep track of so many repositories. So, thank you.